The color code of awareness was developed by Jeff Cooper. Now, Jeff Cooper was a U.S. Marine Corps officer. He served in both World War II era and in the Korean War. And he later went on to do graduate work in history, and he had done undergraduate work in political science, I believe. And what he's really well known for is not just being a commissioned officer in the Marine Corps, but really he's called the father of American pistol craft. Okay, so over the course of his lifetime, he developed a lot of concepts and ideas that have been adopted by the military, by law enforcement, and private citizens around the world who train in firearms. So the color code of awareness is about understanding how to think in a fight and how to be prepared so that you're not easily taken advantage of because you're unaware of your circumstances. So what I would recommend is after you watch this video and you get the basic gist of it, if you're not familiar with it, go look it up online. Read his writings, so the original writings by Jeff Cooper himself, and then also read what other people have written as well, because there's some pretty fascinating academic pieces and ideas and concepts that have been expounded upon after Jeff Cooper did his original publication. Now, the basic color code of awareness is condition white, condition yellow, condition orange, condition red, and then later on the U.S. Marine Corps added condition black. Now let me go through these. Condition white is the worst condition you can possibly be in. There's only one time or one circumstance that condition white is acceptable. Condition white is only acceptable when you're safe. And I'll expand on that in just a second. But essentially what it is think of it as white noise. That's the best way for me to describe it. And a good example is when you're driving your vehicle down the highway. Have you ever driven somewhere, to an appointment, to friend's house, to girlfriend's house, to go to your job? And let's say that it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 45 minutes, and you get into your car and you drive there, and then you get to your exit and you're like, wait a second, how did I get here so quickly? Well, that's condition white. The fact that you have sort of a block of time that you can't really account for, that you're not really aware of, that's like the worst possible condition you could be in. It's easily the most detrimental and unsafe condition you could ever be in. And so here's why. Think of it like this. You can't be ambushed if you see people waiting for you to ambush you. It doesn't mean you can't be attacked. It just means that that element of surprise isn't going to be there because you caught something, you saw somebody, or whatever the case may be. And in combat arms, that's a fact, right? So if I'm in the infantry and I set up something like an L-angle ambush for a squad or maybe a convoy or something like that, and they come through and we're able to execute it as planned, you know, things are pretty golden, and we're likely going to be the ones that are the victors in that circumstance. However, if on the way to the ambush, they're traveling down and they see one of our guys, and they're able to call ahead and let people know, well, what happens? The ambush is thwarted. That doesn't mean, again, we can't get into some kind of tactical skirmish. That just means that the ambush itself is no longer effective. Now, it changes the dynamic of the fight entirely. So what does that say to you? Well, you don't want to be caught by surprise. You want to be aware, and you want to be thinking as the fight takes place, not at a point where you're trying to react to the stimulus. And then there's a big difference between reaction and response, too. Response is trained. You respond to something, that's an active choice, active participation. It's an act of your will, of your volition, right? Whereas a reaction is what? The reaction is your brain spontaneously reacting or making choices on your behalf based on patterns. So let's say that you don't have a pattern for dealing with an ambush. Well, then your brain gets overwhelmed while it's searching. There's that pause. You've heard of people freezing? They literally, something happens and they freeze. That's because the brain has no way to figure out what to do. It's looking, it's searching, it's going like, okay, rattlesnakes, crackers, how to make biscuits and gravy, how to open up Word on an XP computer. Oh, that's way old. How to write a report, how to have sex. Your brain's got all this information stored, you know, 20,000 hours worth of tape, if you will, that it is able to recall from and then take those patterns and inject that pattern into the given circumstance so that you then handle the circumstance to the best of your brain's ability to deal with that particular situation. If you have no pattern to deal with something, you're going to freeze. You're going to react. So you'll have an adrenaline dump, your brain is going to go on overload, and you're going to do things that quite often are going to get you in more trouble than they are going to save your butt. So condition white's horrible. The only time condition white is acceptable in my mind is when you're in your house with the door shut, door locked, bolt locked, maybe a security gate like I have in front of the house, your alarm system's on, your dog's at your feet, and your weapon of choice, let's say a Glock or an AR, is within close proximity of you so that you can handle something if it makes it through those defenses and finally makes its way into your presence. If you have no layers of security, condition white is dangerous, okay? The ultimate condition white is when you're sleeping because you really don't know what's going on. Okay, now, leaving condition white, moving into the next logical color, which is yellow. Condition yellow is a state of general awareness. It's not a heightened state, it's not a subpar state, it's a general state of being aware. Your head's up, your shoulders are back, you're not looking like a target, and you're watching, you're scanning, you're being mindful of what's going on. You're also prepared because you've trained, you've taken the time to understand how to handle circumstances that might become emergencies, such as potential fights and that kind of thing. So condition yellow is as soon as you leave your house and you open up that door and you look outside, you're immediately at a state of condition yellow, and you should stay through that condition your entire day until you're safely in a position where you can go back into condition white. Okay, that makes sense? So it's not a specific target, it just means you're paying attention. That way, should evil, rear its ugly head, should a circumstance happen that you need to address, you actually see it. It doesn't just pass you by and then blindside you, okay? So the next state is condition red. Condition red is basically the fight is on. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Condition orange. Condition orange on the spectrum says I'm now aware of a circumstance, I'm aware of a potential threat. I see that group of young men walking down the street and they're loud and boisterous. Maybe they're not really a threat, but they're a potential threat, okay? I see that potential threat, I am then going to act accordingly. Maybe that means I walk across the street, maybe it means I turn around and go a different direction, maybe it means I'm bold enough to walk through the middle of them because I don't really perceive them as a threat that is going to escalate anywhere. And that's up to you, man. You have to make those judgment calls based on your daily routines and the things that you're doing. It could be you see a car weaving in and out of the lanes. That's a condition orange, right? You were in condition yellow, so you saw that car up ahead of you, 10, 15 cars up ahead, and you see the brake lights at night going backwards and forwards. That's a potential threat, is it not? Sure it is. Just as much as a threat as a guy walking down the street dragging a samurai sword behind him where you hear that noise going against the concrete. Right? That's a serious threat. So you ever see somebody like that looks disheveled and they're dragging a samurai sword down the concrete behind them and it's bloody, I would say you might want to run as you're dialing 911 or if you're in the UK 999 or whatever it is for your emergency system. So condition orange is you're now aware of a specific possibility, a specific threat, and you're now thinking, what am I going to do to respond to that? Again, not react. You've already thought about scenarios. You've already taken the time to do training. You've already learned your pistol craft. You've already learned how to be able to fight in 5 ranges. All of these things are thought out. You got your phone ready so you can dial 911. All of these things have been thought about, prepared for, planned, trained on long before you ever got into a situation where you had to utilize that plan of action for that particular threat. Right? Finally, condition red, which I had accidentally tipped on a little bit earlier in my conversation with you. The condition red is now there is a legitimate threat that has escalated into a fight. So the fight is on, and it makes sense, right? Red is like a color that we really associate with danger, so the fight is on. And I'm now looking to mitigate that fight, mitigate that risk. During the fight, I'm looking to respond to that. I'm punching, I'm crabbing, I'm running, I'm drawing my firearm, I'm doing whatever I have to do now to win, because ultimately that's important. You need to win. You don't want to just survive, man. You want to win and get the heck out of Dodge, okay? Now I understand that there's going to be occasions if you happen to have to defend yourself where you're going to get off a few licks, you'll get off a kick or so, maybe you'll have to pull a knife or pepper spray or a taser if you're a cop or a security officer. Maybe you're having to pick up some improvised weapon on the side of the street like a a stick or a 2x4 or a garbage can or whatever it happens to be, and maybe you're not going to get as far as you'd like. Maybe you're not going to win. Maybe you're just going to be able to get out of the fight, and that's part of the plan. Ultimately though, no matter how you dice it, condition red is, it's on. It's on, it's on, it's on, and you have to deal with that in order to survive. And so the next final color, and the worst color you could be in aside from condition white, it's the opposite of the spectrum. So condition white is basically the absence of color, and condition black is all of the colors. And if you try to remember it from that perspective, condition black is everything hits you at once and you overload. So you're no longer capable of performing. You're not functioning at your optimal capabilities. You're not able to draw your weapon and fire. You're not able to return a punch. You're not able to think to put somebody in the guard and to follow up with a triangle. You're not able to figure out how to get out of someone's mount. You literally lose your capability to function and perform as the fight is on. And worst of all, not only are you losing and being beat and suffering the consequences, but ultimately you can't even tell anybody what happened. There's such a breakdown that it goes by so fast, quote unquote, it barrages you with so much stimulus that you shut down. And you know, an officer might be saying, hey, what happened? You're bloodied and bruised and you're laying on the ground and you've got a laceration across your rib cage from a knife, and your head's busted open and you're bleeding from your nose and your mouth, and you're staggering down the street when they call 911 and the ambulance shows up and the police show up and they're like, what happened, what happened? And you're like, no idea. I have no idea. There's a great video out there on YouTube and Vimeo and a couple other places. I think it's called Kiss My Ass Prank, and there's this guy in California who has some pretty funny pranks. I took the time to watch a couple afterwards, because after seeing him basically get knocked the hell out, I was like, well, I wonder what else he's done and if there's anything else like that. So essentially what he did is he went up to people and he said, hey man, you think you're tough? You want to kick my ass? Well, that seems funny, except clearly he had never trained before, and the consequences were he got into somebody's face. I should say he approached somebody who then got up and positioned themselves to be able to strike and actually hit the individual. So the consequences were he got knocked the hell out, busted his lip really bad, and that kind of thing. So you ought to check it out, man. It's a great video, and it gives a great illustration of condition white being completely unprepared, and then condition black when he got knocked out because he had no clue what happened. He literally gets up, he's like, did I get knocked out? Did I get knocked out? I don't even know what happened. I didn't even feel it. So that is a great, great illustration. Go look it up. Again, I think it's Kiss My Ass Prank Gone Wrong or something like that. All right, that's that's the color code of awareness. Like I said, go look it up. Read some of the academic papers on it too to give you a much better perspective. But that's the overview.